In this series of conversations, we meet Liv Larson, mediator, author, and longtime teacher of nonviolent communication. For over 2 decades, Liv has worked at the intersection of conflict, empathy, and transformation, helping people navigate some of life's most difficult conversations. But this is not just about technique. It's about what happens inside us when we choose to stay present. When we meet resistance with curiosity or anger with listening, together we explore how conflict can become a space for growth rather than avoidance, and what it really means to hold space for others without losing touch with ourselves. Liv shares stories from the field, reflections on power, and the inner practices that help her return to empathy, even when it's hard. Whether you're familiar with nonviolent communication or simply wondering how to engage more honestly and bravely in moments of tension, this series of episodes offers thoughtful and grounded invitations into a deeper kind of being. Let's begin.
So hi, Liv. We're back again.
Hello, Kai.
And I think today's topic could be kind of controversial if we look at the social media and the news, and the word empathy is used quite a lot. And sometimes when I hear a news or some people talk about it, I kind of immediately think, no, that's not it. It seems like this is this empathy thing is something that we can understand very differently. And so I thought we'll spend this conversation on trying to create some clarity about that. Because as I remember, Marshall Rosenberg, he talked about empathy being aware in a certain way, being conscious about how someone else is doing, how they're feeling and needing. And that often is very different than when you look at the news, how people talk about it. How do you understand, or what meaning do you put in the word empathy?
Well, for me, the first layer would be that I wouldn't assume that I know what's going on for someone else, but I try to focus on that. Even knowing I probably will never fully understand someone else's inner experience, I can still focus on trying to follow that. And that creates a certain kind of attention to the other person. And then I try to follow them as close as I possibly can without needing to change it or needing to like what I see or agreeing or even wanting to do certain actions that they would like in order to feel more empathy. But it's on the very basic level, it's kind of a focus of what are you going through in this very moment? In NVC language, we call it what are your feelings and what are your needs at that moment.
So sounds like focusing is a part of it. So what do you focus on? Like you talk about feelings and needs, but how would you, like, where do you put your focus? Because what you focus on is what you see, I guess.
Yeah, and then that question kind of brings us back to when is empathy possible for a person to actually try to go for or try to stretch to have empathy for another human being. And of course, different theories, different things, different schools focus on the brain versus the psychology versus the culture. And all of that affects when I'm capable and when I'm willing to be with someone else's inner process. And that is part if I'm able to be with them or not. So I'm not directly answering your question because I think those questions needs to kind of be looked at before.
So you're saying that it's not just for everyone to do this. We also need to look who is going to do this and are they actually able to do it?
Yeah, because if you look at the brain of a human being, it's usually until, well, there, it's hard to say an age, but often people associate somewhere where we start school, 7, 8 years old. We start to, at least with help from someone else, take in someone else's perspective. Like the narratives, the stories, the books, they start to change there because we kind of see that a young person like that can start putting themselves with support into someone else's shoes. They might not be able to do it on their own, but with help, they will start to see what you see.
So you're saying that small kids, they are like totally occupied with their own kind of reality, and because they're so small, they're still cute. That works, but if that would be an adult, then that would be more of a monster and non-functional behavior.
Yeah.
Uh,
And and I would say it's the best for the child. The child, the child is focused on survival. We don't want them to take in more information about the world that their nervous system can take in. We want them to kind of be self-absorbed to a certain age where they are ready to take in more. So we don't want to, force young people to be empathetic. We might still want to show them or tell them this is not an okay behavior. This is an okay behavior. I don't want you to hit someone, hurt someone. I don't want you to hurt someone else's stuff. I can still show them that, but I cannot expect that they know the pain of the other person until a certain stage. And to me, that is part of building the empathy. It's like getting reminded of how do my actions affect the outside world, to actually get that honesty from older kids or parents and so on.
but your words could be quite provocative, I think, because there are people out there who believe that we're born with this empathy ability. So what do you say to those?
Yeah, I believe they are right, but only to the extent that we're born with it in the same way as we're born with language. So we're born with a possibility to speak, but we don't. Uh, that skill doesn't unfold unless you are part of a culture that speaks. There are terrible examples of children who grew up outside the care and the support from adults, and they don't develop their language skills. And it's very much similar with empathy skills. It's we need a certain kind of fertile ground for it to grow. And it doesn't mean that young children are not warm or care or, I mean, there are lots of beautiful, you just look at Instagram, all the beautiful kids giving someone else something. But I wouldn't say that's empathy. That's the difference.
Exactly, because I can totally egoistically like self, because I like to to give, so I give out of my own self-interest.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will give things or actions that people don't enjoy because that's not what they need, but because I might not be focusing on their experience, I would rather focusing on me being the giver.
Yeah. Because it's fun to give. It's fun to see the how it lands in someone else. But only later on there will be it's still selfish in a way, but it's another kind of selfish, I'd say,
Uh,
later on.
yeah. Yeah, I like what you say with the language, that we're born with the seed or the ability to learn language, but like your Finnish language is not that developed, but
Very
mine is because
underdeveloped.
I'm born in Finland, and you're not. So it's quite obvious how language, we all learn language, or most of us learn language, uh, but the language that we are kind of surrounded by.
Yeah.
So would
And
you then say that that if we are surrounded by people who are caring and thinking about others, that we learn empathy faster, like earlier? Or would you say that if we will only spend time with the competitive, egocentric people, that it will take us longer? Or what do you say about that then?
that would be such an easy way out to say, well, if we just have good enough parents, we will have beautiful, empathetic children. And I don't think it's that easy. I think there are all kinds of variations because every child that is born has different capacities, different, uh, they come as they are. But of course, it matters where we are growing up. If we are growing up in a situation where we are likely to go through trauma and lots of pain, a lot of the focus will be put on healing from that pain and not on extending to hear other people. But then there are different people who have that capacity, even if they are part of traumatic situations, uh, that can unfold that as much as anyone. So there is no kind of clear equal sign, but of course it matters.
So you're not letting parents off the hook fully, but they're not 100% responsible of how their kids turn out.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you've been teaching nonviolent communication for longer than most, like 30 years or something. What pitfalls, if there's any, do you see that people kind of fall into when they are wanting to learn nonviolent communication? And I'm asking because, like, as a continuation of the prior what we just talked about, that if we are in a social context, like if we have friends who have like a specific view on something, that will influence us. So if I'm amongst friends who value empathy, I'm guessing I start to value that as well.
Hmm.
And depending on what kind of interpretation our friends have about empathy, it will also affect us. So that leads me to think that pitfalls spread if we're not aware of them. Do you follow my drift?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So what do you have to say about this?
Well, I remember learning nonviolent communication and getting kind of a format, a grammar, a vehicle for the empathy, which is called empathic listening, and where the focus is on, so are you feeling sad because you have a need for support, for example? Like a way to show the other person that I want to be with you. I want to understand your situation. I want to try to put words to what I think you believe in or what you're going through. And then sometimes that really works. Sometimes that really creates kind of a bond, a connection, a warmth, a relief in the relationship or with the person, like a beautiful, beautiful human to human connection. And that can, of course, be very addictive. I remember the first moments I had that, and I thought, well, this is it. This is like how we need to live. We just need to focus on developing empathy. Then everything will be fine. Because it was a struggle for me to do it, and then the moments when I was able to, I saw the difference.
So
So
what was the difference then? Like,
well, the difference was from coming from being smart, giving good advice, fixing someone, trying to coach them into believing or feeling or going through something particular that I had in mind that would be good for them, uh, which was kind of effortful. It was effective many times, so I'm not. I don't think that that's not good. But it was a difference with the empathy because there was some effortlessness. There was some sense of us being together in this, not me looking down at you trying to fix your problems because you poor thing doesn't know how to fix them yourself. But empathy for me in that sense was more like, okay, we are in this together. We feel the suffering, we feel the good stuff, and let's see what can be dealt with this approach or with this connection. And of course that is a huge pitfall because it's so addictive to have that because it's so beautiful, it's so different, it's so meaningful that was, it's very easy to say, I just want that. That's all I want.
So do you mean with pitfall that you kind of forget what to do next to like think forward and like fix the problem that made you suffer because it was so good to just stay in this kind of warm and accepting connection for a moment? Is that what do you mean with pitfall?
Well, that's one pitfall. And with that pitfall, it's sometimes it is good not to go for the solution so fast, but actually to mourn that this relationship, for example, I overworked. I didn't come home in the evenings early enough to hang out with my partner. I was working so hard that I was so grumpy when I got home that and then I sometimes we need to take the time, be heard in the disappointment, and then mourn that. And I mean, with mourning, to stay with that and to really let that have an impact. How much I don't like what I did before trying to find out, so what am I going to do next? But sometimes we think that mourning is enough, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes I need to talk with my friends who have long-lasting relationships. What did you do? How come you managed to have long-lasting relationships and I didn't? What were the things that I could learn from you? What are the things I can do differently next time I meet someone?
So
So that
so
is,
so it's like the empathic connection is about stopping for a moment and experiencing and checking and kind of mourning, feeling the sadness of not having one's needs met or not knowing how to meet the needs.
yeah,
And then when then that is kind of done enough, then you say we also need to take our effort to learn how to meet the needs uh, better, or so this will not happen again. So we kind of, is that the other
yeah.
part?
Yeah, and sometimes that takes 10 seconds. Sometimes it takes 20 minutes. Sometimes it's take a half a year. And we need to kind of also let that have its course, and at the same time not kind of letting us give in. And because we mediate together, you and I, that mediation can often be about coming to a place where we mourn what happened. But then when that mourning is there and we see each other, we see what my actions, how my actions affected you and vice versa, then we can also look at, so what are we going to learn from this? What is the next step? So we don't want to stop at the empathic connection. We also want to see what we can learn and what's the next steps. And that is kind of empathic action more than empathic listening or empathic connection.
Yeah, going back to learning about the needs, because I remember when I became aware that I have a need for love and that I had, for as long as I remember, trying to meet that need, but very unconsciously.
Mm.
And it was kind of a shock because now I could kind of see uh, uh, that I have this need, and then a learning journey started for me to kind of want to know. So if I have this need for love, how do I meet that need?
Mm.
And I remember reading, listening, trying to interview people, and like investigating into it. And so that would be like the next step, if I'm getting you right, that becoming aware that we have needs and then learning how to meet them, kind of.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And just to say a word about that exploration, there were a lot of people who did not have an answer to my question. So how do you meet your need for love?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was also a little bit shocking. I talked to some people that I thought should know, but they didn't.
Like some religious leaders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we use those words and we don't really have an outside clear action connected to it. It's the same with empathy. How do I meet my need for empathy? And most people that I meet don't know what actually brings them empathy. So sometimes that's another pitfall. Sometimes we can listen to someone and we do our very best. We stretch, we take their perspective, we guess at feelings and needs, we take a pause, not using words, just staying present in silence with them. And they still feel like we're criticizing them. They don't feel that someone is hearing them. So there is also an that's the pitfall in believing if I'm just a good empathizer, everyone else will notice that and receive empathy. But it is a pitfall to think that I can be in charge of the empathy, that I can decide, that I can have power over what amount of empathy you can take in. Because this person is maybe struggling with something else. I have some good stories from that if you want to hear.
Sure, but I want to check first that are, are you saying that yes, I can practice taking other people's perspectives, but if they can kind of nurture themselves with my language and how I kind of relate to them, that is not up to me. So
Not
it's
solely.
I can give someone a glass of water, but if they don't drink it, then they don't drink it.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes with empathy, we try to force them to drink it. We try to, well, I am listening with empathy to you. You should now let me hear you. But there is a good reason usually why they don't want to be heard.
So it's not about pushing it, but it's more like with a more accepting,
Yeah.
how do you say, stance rather than forcing my empathy. I do want to hear the stories, but there's a question that pops in my head. Um, so you talked about learning language, like
Mm.
learning words. Like, are you feeling because you're needing, have building this vocabulary of feelings and needs. But I'm also hearing you saying that it's not about that. So you can learn the language, you can learn the words. Like we teach children to say you're sorry, but they might not be sorry.
Hmm. Hmm.
So is that the same with like a pitfall that people learn a technique or some words, but they don't mean it or it's not genuine?
Well, it's both because it does matter that we have a lot of words for feelings, emotions, for needs. It does matter because there's something like, well, one of the scientists I follow, Lisa Feldman Barrett, she calls it an affective niche. So when my words, the words that I use, actually works for you, when they kind of, whatever words they are, but if we want to meet on an emotional level, if I use emotion words and they kind of say playing for you and they match something inside, you will feel heard and you will have a sense that, wow, this person really hears me out. So then it matters that we have lots of nuances for feeling words so that we can connect with just this person, that we find and look for and offer words that for this person might make a difference. And they can connect with, now it feels like my nervous system is cooling down. I feel like I'm getting insights about what to do next. So in one way, the words does matter a lot. And in one way, in some situation I can use whatever fancy words and it doesn't matter, but just pausing and being with the person, looking into their eyes can be the best impact. So it's never as easy as just either or, but it's both of them together, I think.
So you mean sometimes when we use words, we just end up lucky that those words match the receiver, and
Yeah.
then I can think, wow, I'm good at empathizing. But I was lucky, I wasn't skillful.
Well, both. Probably a bit of luck and probably a bit of skill. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Because because one of the things with that, what I find interesting, and that I think we both realized a few decades ago, that this is a skill that can be practiced. We can actually learn to focus on certain things. We can learn what kind of presence I need to have. We can learn to confirm what we imagine is going on for the other person in a way that matches with this person. You know, practicing being brief with people who cannot take more than a few words, practicing pausing with people that needs more time to digest it, practicing some kind of nonviolent communication slang with people who are allergic to "Are you feeling sad because you need?" Who gets irritated when it sounds like we're using a format. So we can get very skilled and practice this, actually, which I find interesting, and at the same time we cannot control fully the result.
Yeah. And how much would you say that intent, like our motivation, like why do we do this, matters? Because I can see that if you're getting good at, using words, you kind of feel good about yourself. So you just do something that you're good at. But
Mm.
if you start to do it as, look how good am I, or if I do it because I really care, or if I'm really curious, like, what do you have to say about the, the intention part in these exchanges?
Yeah. Again, I notice myself going, yeah, sure, intention is super important and it's not everything. Because sometimes, like you and me, can get into a fight. And if you
Don't say
say,
that out loud.
and if you tell me, can you just reflect back what, if you hear me, can you pause and do that? That helps me connecting with you. So it feels good for me doing it. And the intention is then to kind of help myself to be more present to what you're going through. It's not so much that I want you to have empathy. It is there, but only to a small extent. But it's very much for me to kind of narrow down my spectrum of awareness and my where I am focused, with using even the formatted empathy, because it kind of gets me on up on the road again. So then intention is not maybe 5%, 10%, 15% care, and a lot of the rest of the 100%, I don't know, but would be because it helps me. So empathy guessing is not only for the other persons, it's also for me. And sometimes when someone is kind of blabbering on and not, uh, they don't seem to be able to name anything about what they want, but a lot about what the other person is doing bad, then an empathy guess can just help them refocus on what they are dreaming of, what they're longing for, instead of endlessly criticizing the other person. So there is a different kind of intentions, I would say, or different, maybe like a color, the color mix, that different situations will draw for different intention mix.
So to watch out for simplifying this kind of too much, because it seemed to be a lot of moving parts when it comes to connection and empathic connection.
Yeah, and there's another pitfall in that I remember also going through many times, many layers, I think, is when I first learned empathic listening with NVC, it was like, well, I should have the right intention. So many times it didn't ever feel like I had the right intention. I was still vengeful or irritated and so on. So I was looking for that right intention. And then I would always say, no, I don't have empathy in me right now, so I won't listen to you. And then that became a pitfall, like I had set the standard so high, so I needed like 2 hours of meditation before I could be present with someone else. Uh, and I have found that not to be true. And of course, I want a certain kind of presence. And I might say, I predict my presence will last about 5 minutes. Do you want to have a go at it? Uh, Knowing I'm tired, I would like to speak for 5 minutes, and then I like to check if my energy has changed. So that can also be a pitfall, but a beautiful check-in. Do I have any warmth for this person? And do I have like a well wishing for this person in me?
So you're saying that to check with oneself, do I want this? Like, is it done out of a choice?
Mm.
And at the same time, also being careful that I'm not only letting the weather decide. It's like
Yeah.
it's raining, so I can't go out.
Mm.
So you also like want to kind of practice. Well, if it's raining, it's okay to be wet
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
or I can put a rain jacket on.
Yeah.
So I'm not depending on the good weather to empathize. That's not how do you say? If I'm kind of feeling triggered, then I'm lost. I can't do anything.
Yeah, and that's something I like with what you started with, whether in social media or uh, in the discourse, at least in Sweden and I guess Europe and elsewhere. The empathy has come into that kind of the word is used and so on. So it becomes then a part of uh, our awareness that it's possible, and also about our values. We value empathy. We do value not just democracy, that once every 3 years we get to vote of something, but we value people's voices. So that's the good part of that. And then, of course, that can be a pitfall in itself, but at least we started to value this. And then I can listen to you even if I'm quite irritated, because I know it helps us connect. I know it helps you to trust that I want to understand what you're going through. And then maybe not agreeing at all, but I at least take 5 minutes to hear you out first.
You said before, later earlier in this conversation, that you had some learning experience, some story you wanted to share. Is that about your learning journey about empathy, or?
Yeah, and it connects very much to what we just talked about, because I was so excited about empathy. I was so excited about empathic listening. I was so excited about using words for empathy. And of course, I started with people uh, close to me. And I never got why my mother seemed like she was like never taking it in. She was like, and it never seemed to have an effect on her until quite well into the way of, for me, teaching NVC. I realized she was overwhelmed by my empathy guesses. She needed much more time than my clients did or people that were into NVC did. And so when I started to give her that rhythm that she could take, and that shifted everything. So it could sound something like I came to her place and she was grumpy about how boring the people in the same house as her were. Just old people wanted to talk about how sick they were. So I would make an empathy guess. I would say, so I guess you're disappointed. You want meaningful, fun conversations with people. Even if you're old, you still want to talk about other stuff than how sick people are. And she would look at me kind of, and I maybe see her swallow. She kind of looks at me, looking kind of confused. And then she would answer me and say, "Do you want coffee?" And before I would be irritated, come on, stay with the pain. And, but then I realized she needed space. She needed to have some minutes, go for the coffee, melt the gas, check if it was connected to her affective niche, if she could connect to what I was saying. And then a few minutes later, she would come back with the coffee and she might say something like, yeah, you're right. Like, we have very short time to live. Why not do something fun? And I would take a breath and check in if she's ready for another guess. And I would say, yeah, so it's like you want to harvest the last days of your life. You want to get the most out of it. And she would again give me that look, like looking at me, swallowing, kind of numbing, it felt like, for in my eyes, like pausing in the flow that I was in connecting to her. And then she would answer and say, yeah, and I made some cookies yesterday, and they're in the freezer. Do you want some? Should I go and get them? And then I started realizing again that she needed more time. So it took time to hear her out, but she would come back and say, "Yeah, I'm sad. My time is running out." So we would come close, but it takes time if I wanted her to also be there, not just me having my wisdom or my beautiful empathy guesses at the center of it, but actually letting her unfold. And that taught me a lot with other people as well, not to force it, not to, you know, push my empathy on them. And then not also making diagnosis of them if they don't take it in.
Well, she did, right? But it took more
Yeah.
time than you were used to.
Yeah.
For me, this kind of brings it all back to the definition of empathy. That some define it as being able and willing to take other people's perspective. So it sounded like you finally did with your
Yeah.
mother. Like you
Yep.
found the pace that her pace.
Yeah. I
And
had
what
been
would
willing, but I had been willing for some time, but not
but not able,
capable.
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say for your own nurturance? How how did that experience, those conversations, like affect you and your relationship to your mother? Like I could hear
Oh,
that she felt understood and she got company from you in those moments. But how was that for you? Or how is it now? Like,
yeah. I'm so glad for the question because it changed everything, I'd say. From me being kind of using terms about her like she's cut off, she's not connected to herself, like all kinds of ideas about her in my head, but not realizing it was me that was the problem. Me, I was the pushy one. I was the one trying to direct the time it would take or the flow. And then when I started uh, realizing not maybe even the content of her words, but realizing her rhythm, it felt like the getting to know the rhythm helped me get to know her. And it brings tears to my eyes at this moment because it's such a beautiful connection from how it used to be when I felt bored and kind of everything was seemed to be on the surface, and everything seemed to be about coffee and cookies. And now it's much more about me having some extra moments with my mom.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time swallowing at this moment as well. Seems like coffee and cookies can kind of hide things if you're not looking carefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. So what if people who are listening to our conversation feel like, oh shit, I want to learn this? And no, I don't have 30 years. I don't want to spend, trying to figure this out. I want to learn it now.
Mm.
So if you would give some kind of direction or inspiration or maybe even advice where to start, or
Yeah. Well, so many
is that
times.
doable?
Well, yeah. So many times in this podcast, in the other um, episodes, we have been talking about curiosity, about like being willing to be curious, being willing to not know. So I think the best advice I could give is to kind of learn this nonviolent communication way of guessing feelings and needs. And then when I have that, to kind of forget that format, have it in my back pocket, so to say, and then see what happens if I'm curious, if I'm directing my focus on what I don't know about you, what I haven't understood about you, uh, what I haven't, like me, what I hadn't understand about the rhythm of this person, or the capability of checking into themselves. Because what we didn't say about my mom is, of course, she's 89, and when she was young, there was no one who asked her about what was going on inside of her. Maybe not until she was 40 or 50, when it became kind of a fashion to talk about oneself. It was even taboo to start sentences with "I feel," "I want," when she grew up. Like that was the discourse of northern Sweden. You were not supposed to talk about what you want. So getting to know the unknown of this person, being curious, how can I be there for you? That is a very good start, and not being rushed for results, or but being willing to spend. I mean, I remember us learning, like spending, 5 minutes per day between one and 5 past 1. I will see if I can find someone that I can listen to without trying to fix them. Just as an experiment. And life is full of possibilities to do that, actually.
Yeah.
And of course, you can read books and you can go to courses and so on, but you can also do very much just by being curious and present.
Yeah. Yeah. Reading a book without being curious, or going to a training, or having kind of, or paying for support, so to say, and not being curious, that
Mhm.
seems to be a waste, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to kind of take the pendulum to the far other side, like when I read the news, I see a lot of people being worried or frustrated that if we only do this, if we only kind of take other people's perspectives and we kind of broaden and broaden and broaden, that we might forget to set boundaries, to think about uh, things. So maybe that would be a future conversation, that empathy, as I see it, is one side of the coin.
Yeah.
And you can't, there is no coins with only one side.
Yeah.
So to be good at empathy, we also need to be good at expression or setting boundaries. Or do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to believe if I'm just good enough in empathy, I will actually be better at setting boundaries because I will be able to take it when people are irritated at me for setting a boundary. And that is true in one sense. But I also see us really get so attached to empathy. And I even hear people getting irritated at in nonviolent communication workshops where they are not met with empathy, empathic listening. It's like there it becomes a should, a demand. It's a like everyone else should listen to me, uh, and they are not ready to take in other people's boundaries. So. Yes, I think that's super important. And especially as empathy asks us to be kind of sensitive, open, uh, and then if we are not clear on when our energy levels are drained by that, when we are actually getting kind of depleted by listening, people are using us as a kind of wastebasket, and we are not saying, please, it's full, I need to empty it or I need to do something, then we really risk that what people call emotional empathic fatigue, I think.
Yeah.
It's like the term is because we do it, and I would say we do it like kind of out of habit or maybe out of valuing that, but then not remembering to value ourselves or
But
empathy for ourselves.
isn't empathic fatigue also more common where it's part of your role? Kind of you're supposed to, there's not a choice or
Yeah,
experience choice. It's like you should listen, you should empathize.
yeah, yeah.
And how can one be really genuinely curious if one should?
Hmm.
So there's a like a catch 22 in it as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it does matter if I, with the empathy fatigue, for with things that we haven't come into. It's like if empathy has become sympathy, where I'm kind of agreeing with you or confirming you, or kind of saying, "Yeah, you're right." That can be even more draining. At least if we can have that key differentiation of sympathy and empathy, we are closer to not use up all our capacity, because we can tell ourselves, well, I'm hearing that, but I don't agree. I'm at least inside, if I'm in a role where I cannot really tell you that, stop, uh, I at least know that I'm not agreeing with you. So there's like an inner boundary. But even so, to actually say it out loud, like, I'm hearing that you're going through this, I'm hearing you longing through that, and now I would love for you to hear me, because I'm not sympathizing with that, because I see it like this. To have that balance is crucial in the long run.
Yeah.
And that's the what I mean with the pitfall. We fall in love with the beautiful empathy. It's so hopeful. It's so much like healing with from if you have a childhood of pain and trauma, if you have a school years of not being heard and so on. And then it's a pitfall to believe just because it feels so good, it's the cure for everything.
So would you go so far as saying that it's a little bit like sugar? It might taste really good, but if you eat too much of it, you might get sick.
Yeah, yeah, and irresponsible, I'd say. It's like if you have enough empathy from people, you might start feeling like everyone is sympathizing with me. If you never get to hear the honesty from them, you will hear the empathy as sympathy, even if the person is not sympathizing with you. But they were not honest enough to tell you that, well, I don't agree with your conclusion or with the action and so on. And then it's like we become an island.
So that's when empathy turns into sympathy just because we only play one side of the coin.
Yeah.
We only empathize, we don't show our uh, boundaries or the contrast. Like, so
Yeah.
our own voice is part of installing real empathy, so to say. And if we don't have that, then
And I would say that also connects to what we were talking about before in this episode about children. I can empathize with a child that has just uh, pinched another kid. I can say, I guess you were frustrated. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done that. And I don't want you to do that. If you feel frustrated, please come to me. Next time you feel frustrated, what would it take for you to come to me instead of pinching your friend? So I can hear them. I can hear they were probably really frustrated, really in pain or disappointment. I can hear that, but I don't need to like the action. And that's how I show the empathy, but not the sympathy with their action. And
and I might
if I
even I might even protect the other child, right? Physically, just separating them or
exactly, exactly. I hear you're frustrated, but I'm gonna protect this other person from your trying to hit them, because supporting, caring for them is more important for me than you feeling being free to hit anyone any way you like, because you both matter to me. So that's like how kind of part of practicing empathic connection more than the words.
so for me that also kind of paints a little bit the picture that I can see in the media, that sometimes we or people call it empathy, but they're actually taking sides, or
Yeah.
they're not standing up for their own boundaries, maybe for fear of being punished or not being liked, or so I think this is the challenge, that we could kind of make an index system of like different levels of empathy, like real one and fake and everything in between.
Yeah. And that there's nothing wrong, of course, with taking sides. Uh, but first thing is to know that we're doing that, to make sure we are that honest to ourselves to say, okay, I am sympathizing with this person. Can I also empathize with them and with the other person that doesn't agree with us? Can I take their perspectives as well? Then it becomes empathy. And for us being mediators, that's kind of the one of the main things to do, to realize when we are biased or have sympathy, and accept that, but not act on it.
Yeah, I think that is an important part, that it's easy to think that sympathy is bad and empathy is good or right,
Yeah.
and then you don't want to acknowledge when you actually agree with someone and that you sympathize with them. And
Yeah.
yeah, cool. um we actually have we need to spend a little bit of time preparing for some mediation work, Liv, so I thought we'll end
Yeah.
this conversation, or not end it, we'll continue another time, as
Mm-hmm.
we say.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for taking the time, and if you're listening to this, please, if you like it, please rate it on your pod player. It really helps people who want to find this podcast to find it in the algorithms. And yeah, so before we end for today, Liv, is there anything you want to say?
There is, because I find this conversation around empathy, as you're also connecting it to social media life, and we connect it to childhood and to mediation and so on. It's so rich. We could probably talk about it a few episodes. So if you do have questions on it, if you as a listener has questions on empathy, please let us have them, and maybe we find another episode where we can answer more of those questions around this beautiful subject.
Yeah.
And how
Yes.
do they do that?
In the episode description, there's some links. You can check out if there's any books that you written, Liv, that we've kind of touched subject on. And there's also some other stuff, programs, but also how to connect with us.
Hmm.
Cool. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation with Liv Larson. If you want to learn more about Liv's work, upcoming trainings, or dive deeper into nonviolent communication, you'll find her at www.friaraliv.com. You'll find links to Liv's books mentioned in this episode in the show notes, along with more information about our international mediation program and the Reimagine Communication program, perfect if you're looking to deepen your practice in mediation and integrate nonviolent communication more fully into your life. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay connected,